Cindy, you can start. Unmute, please.
Reynold, I was told you are playing the video first before I can open the event and do the welcome notes. Reynold, I was told you are playing the video first before I can open the event and do the welcome notes. All right, are we ready to go? Please pardon us for the delay this afternoon. We're just waiting for our technical team to put up a video for us on the screens before we get started. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Reynold. All right, so we can get started now. Welcome, everybody. Happy International Youth Day. Good afternoon and good morning, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and all of you distinguished guests. As I already said, happy International Youth Day to every young person who's identifying as youth from around the world. I know there's different age groups that are identified as youth, be it you're 30 or you're 35, and of course, to many of us who still identify, being youthful. It's not an age thing, but it's just all about the way that you feel. A very warm welcome to all of you to this virtual event. As I said, our apologies for starting late. We had a few technical difficulties at this time, but I hope everyone is ready and your seats are buckled up and are ready to go. We have a very wonderful program outlined for you. We have wonderful guests. We have an amazing panel and a great discussion that will be held sometime during the event. We also have polls that will be coming up. And by the way, this event is has interpretation in French, so you can just check over for the language that you understand as we go along. And as I said, welcome again to the launch of the report on the greater inclusion of African youth in public service and governance, as well as to an intergenerational dialogue panel on the intersection between youth advocacy and political will in driving youth inclusion in leadership. So this event is hosted, of course, by the African Leadership Institute in collaboration with the African Union Office of the Youth Envoy. The partnership was culminated in a 2-day virtual engagement, which was held on between May 4th and May 5th, 2020, a couple of months ago. It included policymakers, there were young ministers, parliamentarians, and youth leaders who came together to discuss the best practices in terms of introducing policies which facilitate greater youth inclusion in governance and position of influence within the continent. As we know, our continent of Africa has the largest population of young people, so it's very imperative that Young people are included in policy making, they're included in decision making when it comes to places of leadership, but there's also co-leadership and mentoring involved. And then following these engagements, of course, in May, a report documenting all the outcomes and the insights from the workshops were developed by the OIE and the AFLI, sorry to say. And so for us to get started, for those joining us for the first time, I'm sure a few of you have seen me in a couple of virtual events that we've hosted in a few months. My name is Cindy Zamora Bernard. I'm based out of Toronto, Canada. I am the team lead and coordinator for the intergenerational dialogues here at the Office of the Youth Envoy. And I'm honored to be your event MC today, as well as the moderator for the wonderful panel that will be happening today. And before we start our program, I'd like to, of course, honor and recognize all our high-level guests that are joining us here today, including the keynote that will be coming from Her Excellency, the First Lady of Namibia, Mrs. Monica Gaynos. My pleasure also welcoming, of course, our AU Youth Envoy, Ms. Aya Chebi. Happy International Day to you, Aya. And as well as the ministers that will be part of the panel this afternoon. Her Excellency, the Commissioner at the AU Political Department, Mrs. Stelzoma Minata Samete. My apologies, Your Excellency, for wrong pronunciation. And of course, we'll be having Mr. Jay Naidu, one of our pioneers for youth leaders. He's a strength to reckon with. Jay was a cabinet minister in the Nelson Mandela cabinet, so he will be here to join us for the panel that we'll be hosting. And so without any further delays, I'd like to invite the Youth Envoy to take the floor to give us her opening remarks at this time. Also bearing in mind that we are running a little bit behind time, but I'm sure we're going to catch up. Ms. Shaver, the floor is yours, respectfully, for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cindy, and good morning, everyone. And first of all, happy International Youth Day to everyone. Youth and former youth, it's the day to celebrate to everyone. I want to first of all acknowledge the presence of the First Lady of Namibia with us. I met the First Lady early this year and could not get her speech out of my head ever since, and I'm so grateful. Your Excellency, for providing the time to be with us today. I know it's a busy day for you, International Youth Day, but you chose to also be with us. So I'm sure African youth will be so inspired by your keynote. Commissioner of Political Affairs, thank you also for supporting the project. I want to especially thank Public Service Division and African Governance Architecture Secretariat of the Department of Political Affairs, who have provided a lot of guidance throughout this process. And we'll continue to work with you, Commissioner, to establish the network of African youth in public service. So I'm glad we have your full commitment and support in this endeavor. I want to welcome all of you, welcome my mentor, Jay Naidu, who served in the Mandela's cabinet. I hope internet challenges will not hinder us from hearing his wisdom. I want to welcome our young ministers, my sister Wale, Minister of Youth in Sudan, and my brother Christian, newly appointed Minister of Youth in Chad. And there are many other young ministers on the continent we would have loved to have here. Africa is very proud of you all, and you are examples and role models of what this launch actually is about. I want to welcome everyone watching us. Thank you for being with us in this special day for the launch of the report on greater inclusion of African youth in public service and governance. The report, as Cindy said, is the result of 2 days virtual workshop we convened in May with our partner, the African Leadership Institute, and brought together experts, policymakers, and youth and governance to share best practices and analyze reforms on the continent. The workshop resulted in 8 practical policy recommendations that we are revealing today, and all of the reforms we identified have been tested in at least one African country, and it's showing results and impact, and it can be replicated in other countries. The report also takes its foundation and analysis from Agenda 2063, the African Youth Charter, the African Charter on Public Service and Administration, which is extremely important because We have one of the most progressive continental frameworks in the world, and to see results, we just need to implement. We also want through this report to bring attention back to the governance gap of supply and demand and the generation gap, which shows the average age of African leaders today as 64 and the average age of the population at 20. So we have the largest gap in leadership in the world, which is resulting in distrust between African institutions and youth, and especially more visible now during COVID-19 pandemic. Young people see this as not only a health crisis, but also a governance crisis. So we're hoping with this report that we will also transition to another theory of change, because we are a generation in transition, and we need to move beyond or from a transfer of legacy and passing the torch and the baton, as we always hear, to move to an approach of intergenerational co-leadership, because we cannot inherit systems we didn't co-design. Instead, we need a wider generational collaboration and solidarity based on experience sharing, dialogue, and co-creation. And to conclude, for my peers, I think as young people, as young women, we need to also have the will and guts to occupy leadership positions we deserve. We do not need permission to participate or to be invited at the table. We must occupy the parliamentary seats, the ministries, the local councils, the municipalities, political parties, and all the governance spaces, so we can digitalize our traditional bureaucratic institutions and contribute to our countries, because whatever decision we're making today, we will be the ones bearing its results. I believe truly there is no governance without intergenerational co-leadership. And now the launch is only the beginning of our advocacy efforts. So we hope through this report to reinvigorate this debate on public policies on youth, and particularly the reforms related to public service. And from here, I hope that we will continue to build a community of peer learning and best practices to attract more youth and more of you here watching us into governments and politics, and push for accountability of these reforms. I want to really thank in closing Dr. Jackie and her entire team at AFLI for this wonderful collaboration. Thank you to the co-authors of the report, Monique and Dr. Chamaka. Thank you to the Ford Foundation for funding the project. Thank you to my team from the Office of the Youth Envoy and everyone behind I might have missed who contributed in one way or another to this final product today. And all of you watching us, let us mobilize and advocate in your countries and across the continent for these 8 practical policy recommendations to ensure together we can co-lead the Africa we want. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chadwi. That was amazing, and how so fitting that this report is being launched today on International Youth Day. And thank you as always for always echoing and reminding us of the importance of intergenerational co-leadership. And I'm sure our beloved continental leaders are hearing our voices, they're hearing your voice, they're seeing your leadership. And of course, I think the young people are responding as well to the call of them coming to the front and taking on, and lifting up the banner to co-lead with the seasoned leaders and their leaders in each of their respective communities. And now I'd like to invite Her Excellency, the Commissioner, Minata Samate Selsoma, if she's on the line, for her to take the floor to give us her remarks respectfully for 5 minutes. Your Excellency, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellence, Madame Monica Gengos, Première Dame de la République de Namibie, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, on m'a dit qu'il y a beaucoup de ministres, Soudan, Tchad et Afrique du Sud et autres présentes à la réunion. Honorables membres du Parlement, chère fille Aya Chebi, envoyée spéciale de l'Union pour la jeunesse, Mesdames et Messieurs les participants, tout protocole dûment observé. C'est pour moi un honneur de prendre la parole à l'occasion du lancement de l'important rapport sur une meilleure intégration de la jeunesse africaine dans la fonction publique et la gouvernance. Le lancement de ce rapport coïncide aujourd'hui avec la célébration de la Journée internationale de la jeunesse. Je voudrais à cet égard exprimer mon appréciation à l'envoyé spécial à Yachebi et surtout également à African Leadership Institute pour l'excellent travail abattu afin de nous permettre d'avoir l'important rapport aujourd'hui. Il s'agit d'un véritable outil de référence qui ouvrira certainement la voie à un meilleur engagement de la jeunesse africaine dans nos administrations et autres secteurs de la gouvernance. Mesdames et messieurs, il vous souviendra que les chefs d'État et de gouvernement de l'Union africaine ont dédié toute une année, l'année 2017, à la jeunesse sur le thème de tirer pleinement profit du dividende démographique en investissant dans la jeunesse. Ce thème tire son quintessence de l'agenda 2063 et qui exhorte également les pouvoirs publics et le secteur privé à considérer l'investissement dans la jeunesse et les femmes comme fondement afin de nous permettre de réaliser l'Afrique, une Afrique développée, paisible, prospère. Je souhaite également rappeler qu'en 2017, lors de la commémoration de la journée de la fonction publique à Kigali, il avait été recommandé de consolider la culture des prestations de services publics de qualité centrée sur les citoyens. Pour ce faire, les États membres de notre Union ont été invités à promouvoir urgemment la participation des jeunes au niveau de la fonction publique, faciliter leur accès aux structures décisionnelles de la fonction publique afin d'impulser les changements que nous souhaitons pour résoudre les problèmes que nous rencontrons dans nos administrations. Je voudrais également rappeler le rapport de la Banque mondiale sur l'importance de la jeunesse africaine entre 15 et 25 ans qui constitue 37% et au-delà, nous avons plus de 60% qui sont sans emploi, ce qui n'est pas normal. Il nous faut exploiter ce potentiel et à travers les programmes pour bénéficier du dynamisme de nos jeunes, afin de permettre aux citoyens d'une manière générale et à la jeunesse de participer au développement du continent. Il est impérieux de mettre en place des institutions publiques solides, compétentes, innovantes et de promouvoir le développement professionnel qui serait fondé sur le mérite avec une implication des jeunes. Chers participants, conscients de l'importance de nouer ce partenariat avec la jeunesse et d'assurer leur pleine participation justement aux questions de la fonction publique, le bureau de l'envoyé spécial est là souligné avec notre important partenaire African Leadership Institute et appuyé par les départements de l'Union africaine, ont travaillé sur le projet conjoint PACATI visant à renforcer l'inclusion et l'insertion des jeunes dans les processus décisionnels. Le présent rapport est donc une meilleure intégration de la jeunesse dans la fonction publique et la gouvernance qui fait l'objet du lancement aujourd'hui. L'atelier de ce jour qui réunit beaucoup de décideurs, je me félicite de la participation de la première dame de Namibie et de ministres jeunes et je suis certaine que les fructueux échanges que nous aurons permettront justement de faciliter une grande inclusion des jeunes dans la gouvernance et à des positions d'influence afin de promouvoir le partage des bonnes pratiques sur le continent africain. La fonction publique est un des piliers de la gouvernance à travers des services de qualité au profit de nos citoyens. On a besoin de changements qualitatifs et ces changements ne peuvent se faire sans la jeunesse de notre continent. Nous avons besoin de cette jeunesse qui est très compétente en matière de nouvelles technologies et d'autres technologies porteurs qui peuvent nous permettre d'améliorer la gouvernance. C'est à ce prix justement que nous pourrons booster les autres secteurs du développement du continent africain. Il nous faut rajeunir la fonction publique. C'est lui insuffler d'ailleurs ce dynamisme dont elle a besoin pour remplir sa mission au service du développement. Les jeunes sont dynamiques, ils ont beaucoup d'enthousiasme, doublé de valeurs, d'intégrité, d'humilité. de recevabilité et je ne doute pas que cette jeunesse est la garante d'un service public de qualité dont les principes directeurs ont été adoptés par les ministres africains compétents. Pour conclure mon propos, je voudrais réitérer un appel que j'avais déjà à lancer aux États membres de l'Union africaine, les invitant à investir dans la jeunesse, à investir encore plus. Les investissements qui seront effectués par nos pays aujourd'hui détermineront la trajectoire de développement de l'Afrique au cours des prochaines années et c'est à ce prix que nous placerons le continent sur la voie de la réalisation de l'Afrique que nous voulons et cela aussi passe par l'implication des jeunes au niveau de la fonction publique de nos États. Voilà les quelques messages que j'ai tenu à partager avec les participants et nous restons disponibles pour accompagner les jeunes en tant que département en charge des questions de services publics, de fonction publique et de décentralisation. Et je vous remercie pour votre aimable attention.
Thank you so very much, Commissioner, for those words. We really appreciate you taking the time to give us your welcome notes. And thank you for echoing, of course, the importance of partnership and the inclusion of youth on the issues of leadership and governance, but also reminding us, all of us here and beyond, that changes, if we anticipate to see them in our continent, they are not going to happen without young people being involved, as they are truly dynamic and they have the ability to lead and engage. Therefore, all our leaders need to really make an investment in young people. So we're very thankful for that note. And at this time, I hope our keynote is ready for us. It is my humble pleasure and honor to introduce one of the most amazing women, I believe, that we're blessed to have in our beautiful continent of Africa today, Her Excellency, the First Lady of Namibia, Mrs. Monica Gaynos. And for those who don't know, she's not just only the First Lady, she's actually a qualified lawyer and a businesswoman, and she had over 15 years of experience in the financial sector. She's also the UNAIDS special advocate for young women and adolescent girls, and she champions the Start Free, Stay Free AIDS agenda at UNAIDS, amongst other notable advocacy platforms that she's involved in. And so if the Office of the First Lady is ready, First Lady, you may take the floor respectfully for 10 minutes to give us your keynote. Once again, welcome. Thank you for being here with us today.
So thank you for having me, and I appreciated listening to Commissioner Samate's very informed views. It's fantastic to be with you again. I'm sure we will meet at some point, COVID willing. And thank you for asking me to have this conversation. I think many of you know by now, the ones who have been following my speaking, is that I prefer a conversational style of speaking. And one of the first things I want to really note is that I attribute meaning to words. And I found it significant that the title of this paper emphasizes the word greater inclusion. It implies that the inclusion that exists needs to be expanded and fast-tracked. And if you distill the essence of the launch paper, the message is essentially, hey, thanks for including us, but stop acting like you're doing us a favor, because the truth is you're not doing enough. You are not doing it fast enough. And since it looks like you don't know how to include us, let us tell you. Of course, those aren't the words used by the authors, and the paper strikes a balance between the need to be diplomatic without diluting the need to be instructive. The words in print are carefully arranged to acknowledge what is being done. It asks that more be done and that they give guidance on how it can be done better. And I know that there's going to be different views on this, but what I've experienced and what I observe is that how you say something is as important as what you say. And this launch paper manages to say what young people are saying to each other privately. These guys don't see us. They include us, but they're not listening to us. I'm sure that by now, many of you have been given a proverbial seat at the table and are starting to notice that sitting at the table doesn't automatically translate into being heard. I'm sure many of you have left meetings rephrasing how you could have said something better, or frustrated that what you meant to say was misunderstood or miscontextualized because of the wrong timing, the wrong context, or the wrong choice of words. Am I asking you to contort yourself to fit into respectability politics and behave yourselves, sit quietly and only speak when spoken to? No, I'm asking you not to conform, not to dilute yourself, and not to seek approval. What I'm asking you is that you think about what it means to communicate effectively and strategically if the chance of your input stands a better chance of being taken seriously, because I make the same point by deploying different language. Then the need to be effective requires you to be smart. Like this paper, which is cleverly launched on International Youth Day, it's possible to deliver some hard truths by being strategic in terms of timing, tone, and truthfulness. If you are sitting at the table and you can't change the agenda, you have not been included, you've been co-opted. I've sat on boards of leading private and public sector companies as the youngest member of the board. I know how it feels to say something that gets ignored, and 10 minutes later, when somebody else uses different words to say exactly what I said, then all of a sudden it's the best thing. The lesson sometimes, it's not how you say something. It's also about who says it. As many of you have noticed, there are rules to power and politics. The worst thing about these rules is that many of them are unwritten and unspoken, and we often need a guide to ensure we don't break what we didn't even know exists. And you'll often just hear, but it's not done that way. But nobody explains to you how it's done. It was interesting to see how the report highlighted the utilization of special advisors as a pathway to politics. It rightly points out that this talent pipeline should be institutionalized and not be dependent on how a head of state feels. I agree with this position. I agree with the assessment that in Namibia, the incumbent president has shown commitment to the appointment of young people. I've seen how he spends time to nurture, develop, and engage young people. But what happens if they break an unwritten rule, or when a new president takes over? What if they don't feel the same way as the former president feels? So it is best to have transparent policies and clear processes. I'm also pleased that the report includes quotas as a way of expediting youth inclusion. It's not a popular suggestion, but it's an important one. The question with quotas will always be, you're so good, why can't you make it on your own? As a Black woman, I understand the nuance of that sentiment. I hear the unspoken complaint that it's unfair and a self-respecting qualified candidate should rely on their competence. The reality is that no matter how qualified or competent a young person is, there are perceptions and unconscious bias that impact how you're perceived. Youth inclusion will not be achieved without a quota system. It's also the most orderly way to ensure continuous intergenerational succession. When I speak about youth inclusion, I speak with the assumption that we're all on the same page, that youth representation must be demographically representative. I know the struggles of many young female political leaders across the continent, and there'll be a moment when we'll need to speak and address the debilitating impact of political sexism on the careers of young women. I want to make some observations, and before I do it, I'd like to explain quickly what informs my views. So while I'm qualified as a lawyer, my experience was primarily in the financial sector, where I started at the stock exchange. I headed up a corporate finance advisory unit in an investment bank. I became a founding shareholder and managing director of Namibia's first private equity bank. I was also a shareholder and a chairman of a commercial bank and many other public and private companies. I was on a number of bodies that gave high-level policy advice, including the President's Economic Advisory Council, Public Office Bearers Commission, the Namibian Chamber of Commerce, and the ruling party's think tank. I mention these things because it has impacted how I see and look at the powerful. When I married my husband, I resigned all these roles and changed from being a participant to being an observer. And as a first lady, people tend to assume you don't know much. And I'm okay with that, as I'm not always in the mood to talk, and it gives me time to observe people and power. It's always a lesson to see how power is used by those who have it and how people who don't have it behave around it. It's fascinating to watch. The question I want each of you to ask yourselves today is, do you have a plan about how you will yield power? It seems like a simple question, but the reality is that the answer is complex. Power is corrosive. It does change people. You can't control something you don't understand, and it's important that you observe power dynamics. Be clear on how you behave around it and how you behave when you have it. When you have power, always remember how it felt not to have power and be guided accordingly. Time won't permit me to go into details, so there are 10 quick lessons I want to share that I've learned as an observer of power. Number one, try avoiding taking sides when politicians start clashing. There's a lot of grievances in the political space, and if you're not careful, you'll be forced to take sides. Politicians don't have permanent friends or enemies. They only have permanent interests. And when they fight each other, they normally don't include you when they make peace with one another. Number two, de-risk your political career with an economic vulnerability plan. I believe young people seeking to enter politics or the public sphere should first have marketable skills, a qualification, or a means of earning an additional income. There is no more vulnerable position than relying on the discretion of politicians for your livelihood, especially if you're unemployable outside of the public sector. Third, learn to accept defeat. I've seen many bright careers destroyed by the inability to accept defeat, whether it's electoral, whether it's not being considered for an appointment you felt you were best suited for, or given to someone who knows or does less than you. If you obtain public office, don't build your personality or your status around it. Positions are temporary. The worst time for a politician that I've observed is the day after he's been appointed, because that's the day his phone starts to ring and he's being reminded by everybody whether they remember how hard they worked and what positions that they deserve. Don't be that person. The fourth lesson is create your own space. Politicians are drawn to those who can articulate themselves properly. This doesn't mean that they will like it. They will respect it, however. Create your own spaces, write papers, be engaged, be strategic, be smart. They can't and don't know all the young people who are capable and competent. The only way you can get their attention is through newspapers, television, and radio through thought leadership. 5, decide how you want to participate. Do you start your own political party? Do you stand as an independent? Do you find an existing political vehicle that you identify with? Do you go against the mainstream? Take a route and stick to it. 6, pick your battles carefully. You'll always find yourself in disagreement with your political principles. There will always be things that can be done better in the public sector. Learning what to keep quiet about and what to fight is a skill. Decide what is important and fight for it. Conflict is part of this public space, political space, and a skill you want to learn is conflict resolution and not taking ad hominem attacks personally. 7, the system can be changed, but it will first try to eat you. I believe that within my context, that to see real reform, you need to get into the belly of the beast. I struggle to convince capable young people to work in the public sector or join politics, as they often feel that there's no upward mobility. They feel there's too much backstabbing, remuneration is too low, and they aren't being taken seriously. Get in and order to make a difference. Understand that there is a price to pay. What you must always understand is that you must know when you're trying to change the system, and you must understand when the system is starting to change you. It's important not to become so blinded that you can't see when something is going very wrong. If you find yourself always angry, frustrated, and in disagreement with your principles, then you need to introspect. This is partly what leads to the governance and generational gaps discussed in the paper. 8, never become like those who fight you. I think that point is relatively self-explanatory. 9, patriarchy doesn't sleep. Politics are a mirror of our societies, and if our societies are patriarchal, so are our politics. Women are judged harshly and given a narrow margin of error, and are often not included when late night political deals and strategies are being discussed. Another element is how consensual sexual relationships are more likely to cost the woman as opposed to the man. Worse so, sexual harassment in politics and in the public space isn't taken seriously. Asa, I'm certain you've explored this angle, but I do recommend that we spend a little time speaking about sexual harassment and sexual violence within the corridors of political power. 10, watch how your political allies fight their enemies. Be careful of your allies who use dirty tactics and decampaign others, as one day when they disagree with you, they will use those same dirty tactics against you. I wish I could share plenty more, and herein lies my point. An important part of fostering intergenerational learning is mentorship. Find yourself a political ally, a mentor who can explain the unwritten rules, who can do translations for you when you say something that sounds different to what you meant, and someone who can intercede for you when a public pronouncement that you make rubs people the wrong way, and someone who can defend you when you are not there. Someone who explains why the public service or a political party that you're part of reacts in a certain way, why they're not willing to do things and be more active on social media or use technology to reach out to the youth or have more intergenerational dialogue. Mentors do assist in bridging the gap between the rhetoric and realities of youth inclusion. The crisis of generational transition afflicts churches, the arts, it afflicts all spheres. The younger generation will always differ with the generation that precedes it. Resisting the inevitable friction and need for transition is not an option for as long as we are mortals. The only logical way to manage generational transition is to intentionally groom suitable successors to ensure a smooth transition in a clearly defined, structured, and transparent manner. This is essentially the point of the paper, and I agree with it. The need for youth inclusion should no longer be a topic. The topic should be, how do we institutionalize and fast-track youth inclusion while making sure that the youth are not only seen at the table, but that they also heard. So thank you very much. I hope that these lessons were useful. And I'm more than happy, I see there is a chat going on. I'm more than happy to answer some of your questions on the chat as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, First Lady. That speech was inspiring. I honestly, amongst everyone else, I wish you could just keep going and talking, and the chat is blowing up. I'm looking at all the comments. Others are asking if you can stay longer. Others are asking if we can expand your time. Others are asking if maybe another event can be made so that you can just come over and continue sharing more of your insight and your wise words. So we really, really value your time here today. We're so grateful that you're able to join us. And for every young person that was listening to that speech, that wasn't a speech, that was the First Lady really being herself, as in how she is being amongst us and really sharing and pouring out and showing us the type of leader that she is. She definitely echoed a lot of things that we've been hearing over and over today, but she's not only echoing that, she's actually walking the talk as one of the leaders that definitely believes in intergenerational succession. And so it is really vital that we believe that it is possible for that. And if I can take out anything from all the things that were mentioned today, I hope every young person here is listening and they can really understand that for those that are trying to get into spaces of leadership, please remember that when you have power, remember what it felt like when you didn't have it, because that's really, really important. I find that that's the greatest lesson for everyone who's coming into any space of leadership. It doesn't matter if it's in a political space or it's in a private space. And so thank you so much, First Lady, for a wonderful speech. I think the questions are coming on the chat. We will be able to pick out some of the questions and then we'll pose them and see how maybe those questions can be answered whilst we're still here in the chat without taking much of your time. And so without any further delays, I'd like to invite Monica to come on for just a few minutes so that she can give us a brief on the report. Ms. Monica is with African Leadership Institute. So I'll pass it over to you, Monica, for now for the next few minutes. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Firstly, I just want to say a brief thanks to, firstly to our funders, the Ford Foundation. Our unstoppable
partenaires,
partners, the
à nos
African
partenaires,
Union Office of the Youth Envoy,
le
our
bureau
incredible
de
speakers
l'envoyé
today
spécial
and at the
de la
workshop,
jeunesse de l'Union africaine,
and all
et
our fantastical technical support team, and of course
à
our
toute
fantastic designer
équipe,
who put the report together for us.
tous
Please
ceux-là qui
don't skip
travaillent.
over the acknowledgement
Donc,
section because
veuillez
it
donc,
really
nous disons
does
merci.
take a whole team to put together something like this,
Je veux
and we are
également
very, very
remercier
grateful
toute
for all the
l'équipe.
support we've had.
Donc,
So I will share
je
my
vais
screen
maintenant
now.
partager mon écran.
So the impetus for this report really rests on the three most compelling reasons why young Africans must be at the center of Africa's development and governance. I won't go into this because, as the First Lady of Namibia said, this really isn't the focus of the report, but these reasons are representation, the co-creation of solutions, and most importantly, sustainability. If we look at global demographics, Africa is by far the youngest continent on the globe and is set to remain so for the next 30 years. 70% of the continent are under the age of 30, while only 3% are over the age of 65. Yet, if we look at governance statistics, in 2018, the average age of an African executive office holder was 64.5 years old. What this represents is a very large governance gap, in which the gap between those who govern and those who are governed is so great that it creates distrust and political instability. So from a sustainability perspective, it is imperative that young leaders are given a seat at the table. African governments must institutionalize formal pathways for young people to move into elected and appointed positions at every level of government and public service. So essentially, that's what this report does. It puts forward a number of policy suggestions to help governments, African governments, think about how they can institutionalize these pathways. And the way the report has organized this is in a tiered manner. So the first, and it's tiered according to 4 themes. The first theme is lowering political and economic barriers to formal political participation in elections. The second theme is fostering intergenerational learning in public service. The third theme is formalizing roles for independent young technocrats. And the fourth theme is institutionalizing the means for youth civic engagement. Each theme is accompanied by an illustrative case study in which the policy or approach has been implemented successfully in an African country. However, we do want to emphasize that this is not an exhaustive list of progressive policies, but rather it is based on our consultation both during the aforementioned workshop, but also after the workshop, and it's also based on available data. And it's also important to say that this is the starting point. It's about opening up the conversation, and it's about thinking about ways to formalize these pathways for young people. So just to give a bit of context about the policies and the country case studies, for the first theme, so theme 1 is illustrated by Yaga's Not Too Young to Run movement, which championed the age reduction bill in Nigeria. The second theme is demonstrated by Rwanda with its well-structured youth internship program, which has institutionalized a pipeline of young skilled public servants. The third theme is illustrated by the case study of special advisory roles in Namibia and Nigeria, which shows how governments can develop a pathway to bringing young technocrats into the policy realm at a much higher level in governance. And the fourth theme is illustrated by the case of Morocco's parallel youth government, which institutionalizes youth civic engagement in government with parallel or shadow youth ministers. So based on these case studies, this report endorses a youth mainstreaming approach, which is essentially a holistic and cross-sectoral approach to youth development, in which the idea of youth development extends far beyond simply the youth ministry. More specifically, this report puts forward 8 practical recommendations. Number 1, adopt an intergenerational co-leadership approach across governance structures. Number 2, lower age requirements for entry into government or for contesting in electoral positions. Recommendation number 3, remove economic barriers. This refers to high candidacy fees, or you could introduce a waiver for young electoral candidates so that they don't have to pay these fees. Number 4, introduce and enforce youth quotas at every level of government and public service. Number 5, develop structured youth internship programs to train and retain youth in public service. Recommendation number 6, appoint young technocrats and special advisors and envoys for support at every level of government in order to drive innovation. Recommendation number 7, strengthen and democratize national youth councils and youth parliaments, among other structures, to ensure that youth contributions across all sectors and government and policies. And the final recommendation, establish accountability mechanisms to ensure that reforms will outlive political will and are not reliant solely on political actors. So these are the 8 recommendations, once again, for everyone to have a look at. We will be showing them again in the break. And on that note, we will be sharing a poll to get a sense of what the viewers think about these recommendations and which ones you would prioritize. It is a multi-choice poll, so you can choose as many answers as you want. And then once everybody has made their selections, this is also just a notification that the report is now live, so it will be available on the link that will be shared shortly. And yes, I'll hand over back to Cindy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Monique, for that. That's great to hear. And again, wants to remind everybody that the poll is up. If you could take a few moments to take part of the poll, it will be very helpful for this event, but also for this report that has been put up for us to understand what you think about what we're discussing here today. And then, of course, we will be sharing the report itself. I believe at this time we're going to take a short break whilst the report is being uploaded. And after the short break, we're going to come back and we will join our panelists for an exciting discussion on youth inclusion. So over to you, Reynold, for uploading the report. Thank you. Apologies on that. I do understand that the report is already live. So you can go ahead for sure and look at the report if you can, because it has been publicized. And so right now, I guess we will move on then to the next session of our presentation today. And at this time, I would like to invite the Minister of, His Excellency, the Minister of Chad, to come and give us his presentation at this time. If His Excellency is ready, it will be my pleasure to give you the floor respectfully for 5 minutes, if that will be all right with you, Honorable Rotunang Mohammed Ndonga. And for those of you who need the translation, don't forget to press the translation button to go with that. Your Excellency, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. I will speak in French, but could you please open the camera, the video, accept me to open the video so that I can... Voilà, bien. Merci beaucoup, Cindy. Son Excellence, Madame la Première Dame de Namibie, chers confrères ministres, Madame la représentante spéciale de la jeunesse auprès de l'Union africaine, Madame Cindy, c'est pour moi un honneur de participer au lancement de report sur une meilleure inclusion de la jeunesse africaine dans le service public et dans la sphère de la gouvernance. En réalité, ce n'est pas une demande de la jeunesse, mais c'est un droit absolu de la jeunesse d'être impliquée dans toutes les instances de prise de décision. Pour parler un peu de mon parcours comme le protocole que j'ai reçu, en réalité, depuis 6 années, je suis un acteur de développement de l'écosystème entrepreneurial et développement de la jeunesse dans sa globalité. Donc, chaque matin, je me lève comme tout jeune qui voudrait apporter sa contribution au développement de sa nation pour pouvoir mener des actions ou bien des activités visant à développer la jeunesse, ma communauté, la jeunesse qui constitue en réalité 70% de la population du Tchad. J'ai été plusieurs fois président du comité d'organisation de la Semaine mondiale de l'entrepreneuriat. J'ai initié plusieurs activités de jeunes et aussi j'ai mis sur pied une organisation qui est appelée le réseau de jeunes pour le développement et le leadership au Tchad qui œuvre pour l'employabilité de la jeunesse dans sa globalité. C'est ce combat de manière désintéressée, civique et surtout pour l'amour de sa patrie qui a bien nécessairement contribué aujourd'hui à ce que je puisse être honoré ministre de la République. C'est le fruit en réalité d'un combat structuré dans tous les domaines et avec la contribution en réalité de tous les acteurs qui constituent la couche jeunesse du Tchad, pas seulement du Tchad, mais de l'Afrique dans toute sa globalité. Parce que vous conviendrez avec moi qu'il faut rappeler que notre président, le maréchal du Tchad, désormais, Idriss Déby Itno, a été consacré champion de la jeunesse en 2017 dans le cadre de la feuille de route de l'Union africaine, tiré avantage du dividende démographique en investissant sur la jeunesse. Je pense que c'est ce départ, cet enthousiasme qui l'a mené, lui, en tant que champion en 2017, à pouvoir désarmer toutes les limites qui ont été données à la jeunesse et pouvoir, lui, se donner la mission de porter auprès de ses pairs le plaidoyer de la jeunesse. C'est une mission qu'il a, lui, portée, pas seulement parce qu'il le voulait, mais parce que la jeunesse, en réalité, avait le droit de participer sur la scène de la gouvernance du pays. Et ce droit aujourd'hui est démontré par le gouvernement du 14 juillet, dont je fais partie, et qui est constitué majoritairement. Ce gouvernement a été rajeuni de la manière la plus drastique jamais vue au Tchad. Donc, ce rajeunissement, en réalité, a permis de donner un souffle nouveau au combat des jeunes dans la quête vers l'inclusion de la jeunesse dans les instances de prise de décision. Je ne me dirais pas le mieux placé ou bien le jeune idéal pour être à cette place, mais je me dis que c'est le fruit en réalité que chaque jeune Tchadien a porté en termes de plaidoyer et aussi en termes d'apport personnel, parce que pour qu'on puisse faire confiance à la jeunesse, il faudrait qu'elle-même puisse être la force motrice de son développement. Et c'est cet aspect-là, c'est cette force-là que chaque jeune devrait apporter pour que, en réalité, les gouvernants puissent comprendre que la jeunesse a un rôle assez fondamental dans la réforme du continent. C'est aujourd'hui une réalité au Tchad, oui, nous sommes plusieurs jeunes ministres dans le gouvernement et je pense que ceci lance un appel assez fort à tous les autres chefs d'État de pouvoir inclure la jeunesse dans les instances de prise de décision. Pour moi, l'autre question, c'est s'il faut choisir parmi ces recommandations, laquelle pourrait être portée au plus haut niveau, c'est le cadre institutionnel même de la prise en compte de la jeunesse dans les sphères de décision. Il ne faudrait pas juste que le président actuel puisse être celui qui porte à cœur la jeunesse, mais celui, si jamais il y a succession, qu'un autre vienne mettre en mal cette représentation de la jeunesse. Il faudrait donc créer ce cadre institutionnel qui permet à la jeunesse d'avoir une part dans les nominations. Et c'est ce combat-là que je me dirais, je porterai tout au long de mon parcours ministériel, mais aussi ce combat qui sera celui d'honorer toujours la jeunesse, d'honorer la jeunesse par l'abnégation, par surtout le travail bien fait et surtout l'amour de la patrie. Il faut aussi rappeler que pour que la jeunesse puisse être entendue, il faudrait qu'elle fasse preuve de bravoure, preuve d'engagement et preuve d'amour assez sincère pour sa nation. Force est de constater que beaucoup de jeunes s'engagent dans la vie associative, s'engagent dans la vie politique juste pour des intérêts personnels. Et face à cela, les décideurs ne peuvent pas croire en cette jeunesse-là parce qu'elle découvre en elle qu'au-delà des intérêts personnels, il n'y a pas d'intérêt à caractère national. C'est un frein pour nous, la jeunesse. Et moi, je voudrais aussi interpeller la jeunesse en cette journée internationale la jeunesse à faire preuve de beaucoup d'engagement pour sa patrie, pour le continent africain, pour qu'elle puisse en réalité impacter par des actions bénévoles, des actions désintéressées, des actions qui viennent du cœur, des actions qui viennent vraiment de l'envie d'exceller, prouver au monde entier que cette jeunesse a sa place. Cette jeunesse a sa place en réalité et le gouvernement ne peut que conjuguer avec elle parce qu'on ne peut pas construire une vision sans celle qui doit porter cette vision. Alors, s'il faut une vision pour le Tchad de lendemain, c'est cette jeunesse-là qui doit être actrice de cette vision-là. Étant actrice, elle doit être impliquée dans sa réalisation. Donc, elle doit être actrice de la co-réalisation de la vision. Et pour ce faire, il faut, pour moi, mettre un accent particulier sur les échanges intergénérationnels. Il faut reconnaître aussi que chaque pays, le continent africain, vient de loin et a ses difficultés, a ses manquements. Il faudrait donc que la jeunesse puisse puiser sa sagesse des expériences du passé et prendre avantage de ces expériences-là pour qu'elles puissent impacter d'une manière ou d'une autre la vie de sa communauté, de par ce fait, toute sa nation et pourquoi pas l'Afrique. Donc, je pense que je lance une fois de plus cet appel à amplifier les actions de la jeunesse, amplifier de la manière la plus idéale possible pour que chaque jeune puisse se reconnaître dans la sphère politique. Et l'inclusion n'est pas une demande juste, n'est pas une faveur à la jeunesse, mais plutôt en réalité un droit absolu de la jeunesse. Et cette jeunesse doit se mettre dans cette posture-là de pouvoir arracher certains droits qui lui reviennent. Et arracher de la manière stratégique. Arracher ne veut pas dire toujours faire la guerre, parce que les revendications, vous conviendrez avec moi, ne permettent que de mettre les freins. Parce que s'il faut aller vers la guerre, celui qui est plus fort que nous ne nous laissera pas gagner. Ils sont sûrement plus forts que nous. Nous devons donc aller stratégiquement leur faire comprendre notre impact et notre force d'agir et de créer avec eux l'avenir du pays pour qu'ils puissent continuer à croire en nous. Moi, je pense que c'est de cette manière-là qu'il faut impacter et continuer ce dialogue-là. Merci une fois de plus, cher Aya Chibi, pour l'invitation. Merci à toute l'équipe qui a voulu organiser cette session-là. Je me fais ce plaisir en réalité de parler au nom de la jeunesse, tchadienne, mais africaine, qui est en quête de son identité. Et cette identité ne passe que par son impact à elle personnellement. Merci une fois de plus, Cindy. Merci aussi à tous les autres panélistes d'avoir accepté joindre ce panel qui est d'une importance capitale pour, bien évidemment, la suite de ce combat vers ce rapport-là. Mes félicitations à African Leadership Institute qui ont aussi porté cette initiative pour que ça puisse voit le jour aujourd'hui. Merci une fois de plus.
Thank you so very much, Your Excellency. It was very inspiring to listen to you, and thank you for making time to be with us here. I know we cannot let you go without asking you a few questions, and being that you're already in the cabinet, I'm seeing on the chats a lot of young people actually have a burning question. They're asking, as the youngest minister that is in the cabinet right now, what are some of the things that you're going to do, or some of the ways that you are going to put forward to ensure that you also support them and help to pave a way for them to be involved in spaces of leadership as the one that you're in? And what are some of the things that you're going to work on to ensure that there's also intergenerational succession and leadership within the cabinet?
Bien, merci beaucoup. Merci pour cette brillante question. Il faudrait comprendre que pour agir, il faut agir de manière spécifique dans le cadre de chaque pays. Moi, pour mon pays, il y a plusieurs défis liés à la jeunesse, plusieurs défis liés même au repli identitaire de la jeunesse, parce que la jeunesse s'est vue plusieurs années mise de côté dans les instances de prise de décision et peut-être a fait ce repli-là qui ne permet pas de cerner vraiment l'impact que le gouvernement pourrait apporter. Il y a eu des avancées assez considérables. Donc, ma première mission à moi, c'est redynamiser même d'abord la structure de la jeunesse de manière institutionnelle, parce que nous avons dans notre département aussi des représentations de la jeunesse. Et pour ce faire, il faudrait restructurer ce type de représentation qui sont en réalité, les organes qui doivent porter plus la voix de la jeunesse. Si aujourd'hui nous sommes invités, c'est parce que Aya Chebi, qui est l'envoyé de la jeunesse, a bien voulu prendre l'initiative. Il faudrait que des jeunes, ce cadre puisse être créé pour que des jeunes puissent de manière indépendante donner leur avis, donner de manière assez structurée leur avis, surtout avec des arguments assez bien fondés. Et c'est ce travail-là qu'il faudrait faire pour que chaque jeune puisse se reconnaître en une institution. Et une fois ce travail fait, naturellement, l'effet multiplicateur se fera, parce que si une jeunesse est assez motivée, elle a cette force, naturellement, elle sera assez innovante pour proposer, être une force de développement. Et c'est de cette manière-là qu'on va pousser la jeunesse à elle-même porter son destin, vers le développement de la nation. Donc, ça, c'est l'une des premières missions que je vais faire. Et nous n'avons pas, au niveau local, nous avons ratifié la charte de l'Union africaine sur la jeunesse, mais nous n'avons pas notre charte nationale de la jeunesse. C'est l'un des combats sur lesquels je vais m'y mettre pour que la jeunesse puisse avoir un cadre réglementaire qui vraiment régit ses droits, régit en réalité les instances qui lui sont accordées. Et bien évidemment, troisièmement, c'est ce plaidoyer aux plus hautes autorités de pouvoir croire davantage à la jeunesse. Et si Dieu merci, chaque jeune joue sa partition, un jour, ils prendront des actes, bien des ordonnances qui vont instituer une partition spécifique pour la jeunesse dans chaque gouvernement. Et pour ce faire, nous aurons gagné un combat sur le long terme.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for that. It was quite precise, and I think the young person who asked that question would be satisfied. And we have a question for the First Lady, if she's still able to answer a few questions for us before we close the event. Ukarabo from Johannesburg in South Africa is asking how the government is including young people in participation in the decision making of the Namibian government. So it goes back to the intergenerational succession, inclusion, and co-mentorship, co-leadership. So Karabo is asking from the Namibian context, what is the government doing in this regard? Thank you, First Lady.
So, Karabo, what the government has done is there's been a number of initiatives, but the report does use Namibia as a case study. And they do mention that the president has been using the role of special advisors to bring young people with special qualifications into the highest levels of government. And one thing that I do know that he's been very conscious about is not requiring these young people to be affiliated to the governing party, as long as they've got the right qualifications. He's also made a conscious effort to appoint a lot of young governors. Karabo, you'll also know that Namibia has a 23-year-old parliamentarian who's a law graduate who had been basically ripped out of her job at the Ministry of Justice as a prosecutor. And then from a governing party perspective, recently there was a meeting where the governing party reduced a requirement for young people to be in the central committee of the party for 10 years before they can be considered for a leadership post in the top 4 of the party. So it's not just the governments that need to do something, it's also the political parties need to make it easier for young people to participate. And I want to agree with the report where it says it should be institutionalized. I think the president of this country is fantastic when it comes to youth engagement and youth inclusion, but it shouldn't depend on him. It should be part of an institutional infrastructure that continues regardless of who is in power. So I hope that answers your question, Karaku.
Un parent là, de Bongo qui fait ça, il est au Cameroun. Il s'appelle Brunel. C'est un cadre aussi qui a fini à l'INDS Yaoundé.
Oh, I'm not sure if His Excellency Rotunda had a question for the First Lady. Okay, I guess not. And we have one more question for you, First Lady, before we let you go. It's from Guilen Isimbi, I believe I'm pronouncing it right. And it's 2 questions, actually. First of all, they're saying, we as young people have a zeal to change our continent through advocacy and politics, but we lack guidance and the right people to guide us in the right direction by giving us advice and helping us through different ways. So the question is, what is the plan to promote the mentorship and the guidance to us so as to create young people, young leaders who are game changers? And to top that question, they're also saying, what is some advice that you can give to young women, especially on how they can climb up the ladder, seeing that it's mostly male leaders that are in some of these spaces, and for young women specifically, they face a lot of challenges and a lot of discrimination and a lot of hindrances along the way.
So the first question, it goes back to what we were saying about the Namibian example about special advisors, so I love the idea of internships. I love the idea of inclusion, but I like the idea more of institutionalization. So what I do know, and I know this personally because I mentor so many young people across the continent, after having encountered them on social media, or I find them at an AU meeting, or we find each other in New York at the ANGA, we take each other's details down, or they direct message me on social media, and we get into a mentorship-mentee relationship, which is also good for me because I learn a lot from them. But it should never be dependent on individuals. So I think there's a lot of people who are in proximity to power, like myself, and others who are in power, like the ministers on the panel, who are available for mentorship opportunities. And you shouldn't limit yourself to only those in your country. Reach out to other politicians and those in proximity to power for mentorship. But I do agree, and I think maybe the AU Special Envoy can take this up, is that there is a need for a more structured, formalized mentorship in this space, because it is important for the mentor and the mentee to trust each other, because you must be able to tell me the detail of what you're going through. I must also be able to confide in you and tell you, well, I went through something similar and this is how I dealt with it. And it's not going to work if 3 weeks later you're going to put my business on social media. And then the second part of specifically for young women and the discrimination and the challenges that are in that space, I think again there is to find the person who can direct you. There's many women who've been through this. You're not going through something that other women have not gone through. When we talk about mentorship, I do not find mentorship effective if we're not willing to be open with a mentee about what we failed at what we succeeded, at what we saw and what we didn't see. So we must establish honest mentor-mentee relationships. We must guide one another. I must be honest to young people, what I experienced growing up in a political party, what I saw that I can't say publicly, but which I must tell them privately. We all know in all of the political parties and public spaces we occupy, which ministers are predators. We know in our political parties which guys we must be careful of because they're not safe. Because unfortunately, and I don't mean this as disrespect to men, our politics are a mirror of our societies. So if there's predatory men in society, there will be predatory men in politics. We don't call them out, but we know who they are. And it's important for those who are in those spaces to warn the younger women who are coming up that be careful of this one. It's not because I'm jealous, it's because I know what these people are capable of. So we must be honest. Thank you.
Thank you very much, First Lady. And as always, your honesty. This is why many of us love having you in most of these chats and meetings, because you truly speak from the heart and you bring out some of the things that some of us are very afraid to talk about, but you say it with such earnest honesty and truth. Well, I think for now, those are unfortunately for everyone on the chat, there's so many questions that we would like to answer, but in the essence of time, I'm going to have to apologize that we won't be able to take all of your questions at this moment. And please accept our apologies. We had technical difficulties for two of our panelists, including Mr. Jay Knight, who I know a lot of you were really hoping that he was going to be joining us today because he really is a great youth empowerment leader. And so for now at this time, I'd like to pass it to Dr. Jackie Chimanzi from the African Leadership Institute to say a few words before we wrap up this event, because I know there are so many events happening out there today on International Youth Day. We don't want to keep you here. We want to make sure that you're going out to participate on the different events where you can lend your voice and say, you know, and do be part of that inclusion. Dr. Jackie, the floor is yours. You may go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Can you see me? Great.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm so delighted that this report has come to being. You have no idea how happy I am today. I think I'm the happiest woman on this continent. This report is so personal to me, and it represents years and years of me deeply contemplating the state of Africa, deeply contemplating the future of Africa. We are not where we need to be. If we continue down this path at this pace, we are really not going anywhere. And I think we need to speak the truth. We spoke about Africa rising, that came and went. We are not where we are, where we should be. Our population growth is eroding economic growth. And as long as your population growth is higher than economic growth, you are really on a treadmill. You're not going anywhere. So in my reflections, I came across the notion that there is perhaps one game change the entire trajectory for the continent. And that game changer, for me at least, is really just bringing the best talent to the table. We need everybody, men, women, young people together to co-create solutions to some of the most pressing challenges that we face as a continent. And currently, young people are just not where they should be. And given the challenges that we currently face, it will require new thinking, fresh thinking, new energy, new solutions to existing challenges. So that's why I just think bringing young people in is the game changer that is going to change the trajectory of the continent going forward. So this report for me is not just another report. I'm a very practical person. I like things to get done. I'm tired of speeches and statements. It's a very practical report. And what it's really saying is that if you're an African country and you're serious about bringing young people in about it, here are the case studies, here are the examples of other countries that have done it with some success, right? So it's important, else as Africans, that we learn from each other. We're so very much used to copying things that happen in the West. This is an example from Africa for Africans. Rwanda is doing it. Nigeria is doing it. Morocco is doing it. Namibia is doing it. So we need to learn from each other. And I really want to give reassurances that as the African Leadership Institute, with the funding that we received from the Ford Foundation, we are here to assist governments that are serious about this and want to take this forward. And we're here to help them. So I'm really, really excited for today. But today is the beginning of a journey. There's a lot of work yet to be done. But AYA has been fantastic. The Youth Envoy of the African Union, the Ford Foundation is very supportive with the funding, and we are here to help. And I'd encourage people to reach out, because we do want to see progress. We can't still be talking about including young people in 2020. Africa is demographically the youngest continent on earth, and yet our leaders are also the oldest. It just does not make sense. It doesn't make sense from a representation perspective. People want to be governed by institutions that look like them. So this generational gap has to close. The representation is wrong, but it also just means that our current leaders are not leveraging the talents around them to help them develop solutions, right? So bringing young people in shouldn't threaten anybody. I always hear, oh, maybe they feel threatened. I'm not sure why anybody would feel threatened. We're here to help. It's our continent. Collectively, it's our continent. But it's actually young people's continent more than the current leaders, right? Because it's their futures, right? So the more you bring them in, the more you involve them, it bodes well for everybody. There's no challenging anybody. We need to co-create. We need to work together. And then finally, from a sustainability perspective, I mean, the African Union has got the big agenda right now, Agenda 2063. But how do they expect Agenda 2063 to work if young people are not involved? So right now, when you ask people, what is Agenda 2063? Young people don't know what it is. Young people are very much divorced from the key institutions that run this continent. They don't know how SADC works. They don't know how the regional economic blocks work. They don't know how the AU works. They don't know how SADC or the EAC or ECOWAS works. And yet, these are the people who are going to inherit these institutions. These are the people who are going to make sure that these institutions thrive and go forward. So the sooner we start to bring young people in to demystify the key institutions that determine our futures, the better for everybody. And some of the recommendations we make are actually really simple. Youth internships. So many young people graduate every year out of university. They sit at home with important skills. You know, an internship doesn't cost much money, right? But it just gives young people an opportunity to begin to understand the world of work and to begin to engage with these key institutions. So some of the recommendations we make are very, very simple. All they require is political will. They are not rocket science. It's just political will. So the sooner you start to bring people in through mentorship and internship programs, I think it's good for everybody. So on that note, I really want to thank everybody for joining this important conversation today. And we are also urging young people to remain engaged, because what we're going to do after this is to take these recommendations to different African governments and begin to encourage them to replicate some of these best practices that we have documented. So today is just the beginning. The journey starts, but we're also encouraging all the young people to help us, advocacy, to raise their voices, to tell their governments that we want to be included. We want internships. We want these appointments, you know. So I'm really looking forward to working with young people across the continent to help us in our mission, because it is, after all, their futures. And they have the numbers, right? So they need to amplify their voices to make sure that their governments hear them. Yeah, but we're here to support you. We're here to implement some of these reforms. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Jackie, and for echoing those words. We definitely understand. We know for sure that the African Leadership Institute is definitely working behind young people, and they are you know, they're leading the talk in ensuring that young people are not left behind. They're actually included. And thank you for giving the support and letting them know that your doors are always open at the institution for them to come and to use the resources that are available to them with regards to, you know, the point of leadership, because this is the time. And this is, I think from my perspective, this was wonderful that this report was actually launched today, because it is International Youth Day, meaning that globally this applies to all the youth. It's not just an African context thing, but also reminding the African young people that they are the leaders of today and eventually the leaders of tomorrow, because Africa is the youngest continent at this point. If my technical team is ready, I would like to ask them to play a short video before we give the polls, the results of the polls. Thank you. Thank you so much. I believe we now have the results of the poll. Well, there they are. And so, as you can tell, so as we go through the poll, the question is, what concrete actions would you like to see introduced in your country? And 36% of you said lower age restrictions to contest elections. 37% of you said reduce nomination fees to contest elections. So that means so that at least economically young people could be able to get into elections if they wanted to, and within their own, and inform their own political party. 65% said introduce youth quotas at every level of governance. I totally believe that's very, very important. We need young people involved in every level of government so that they're able to touch on every issue that matters to them. 68% say develop young youth internship programs. This is what the First Lady was talking about, that youth internship programs are very important when it comes to leadership spaces. So and 52% say appoint young special advisors. I do agree with this one, that we do need to see more young people appointed as special advisors, because they would be able to connect with the larger population, seeing that the continent has more young people than obviously the elders. 52% said strengthen national youth councils, and 39% said introduce a parallel youth government. I think that one is a very important one, and would be quite interesting for a youth parallel government to be introduced. Well, that is the poll that we ran, and thank you so much to everyone that participated in the poll. We will be taking this poll and including it in much of the conversations that will be moving forward onwards from today. But unfortunately, we have to end our program. I'd like to thank everyone that has been part of the program today. I would like to thank our honorable guests. All of you have been honorable. I'd like to thank the wonderful First Lady for joining us today, the Commissioner for joining us today, the AU Youth Envoy. Unfortunately, she had to step off and go to another event. As mentioned, it is Youth Day. It is International Youth Day, so there's a lot of things that are happening out there. I'd like to thank, of course, the African Leadership Institute, the team at the African Leadership Institute, the team at the AU Youth Envoy's office, the Ford Foundation for funding this project. I would like to thank the interpreters for being here with us today. And as well, the webinar was produced by Legenda Ray Creatives. And so if you don't know about them, you can definitely check them out. And for all of you who joined us from the different parts of the continent of Africa, and if you're in the diaspora like myself, hopefully you have a wonderful day. And for those of you who would like to learn more about the African Union Office of the Youth Envoy, you can definitely follow the social media pages on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on YouTube. These conversations are not just ending here on these webinars, but they are continuing onwards with partners such as the African Leadership Institute. And for those interested in the intergenerational platform, I have to put that on because that's my portfolio. Please definitely check us out. We have exciting news to share on a brochure that we will be uploading on our website very soon. So yourselves as young people, if you're interested in hosting your own IGDs, or if you're interested in working with the AU Office of the Youth Envoy to host some of these IGDs, please definitely visit our website. You'll be able to see all that information. And please don't stop engaging with us. Send us your comments, your thoughts, your requests, and your ideas. And stay fabulous. Enjoy your day today. And again, happy International Youth Day to everyone that's celebrating this day from wherever you are around the world. It's been my pleasure and it is my honor to have been here with you today to moderate this very important day. Thank you so much to everyone. Bye-bye, take care, and have a wonderful day.